Hi, my name is Shiloh Brannigan. I'm the owner of Amarillo Brewing Supply. One of the most frequent questions we get is how to brew a batch of beer, so I decided I'd make you a video and explain step by step how to make a all extract brew. So we're making an all extract with Pilsen Light dry malt extract and steeping grains. So right here we have our dry malt extract. And we have steeping grains. There's caramel 40 carapils and chocolate malt in here. And we're just going to steep that for about 20 minutes. We're going to use a liquid yeast. It's White Labs Irish Ale, WLP 004. We have, for our hops, German Spalt and German Northern Brewer. We also have some Y-yeast nutrient for the yeast. And as for equipment, we have our 20-quart brew pot, our floating thermometer, and we have our hydrometer, our great big spoon here. So right now we're just waiting for our brew to get to temperature. When that hits 150, we will get started. It's at 155 right now, so I'm calling that good enough. Any higher than 155 is going to cause some off flavors, and we don't want that. So we're going to steep these for 20 minutes at 150 to 155. You want to make sure that you tie your grain bag very loosely, and you'll see I've got it tied very loose, so once you poke it and stir it, you can get all the color and sugar out of it. We're a few minutes into it. We're still at our steep. It's important to make sure that you continually stir your steeping grains to make sure that you get all of those colors and flavors out of it that you can get. Our sparge water is at 159, 160, which is where we need to be. So we're going to go ahead and remove our grain bag. Okay, and just bring this over to your sparge water. And what the sparging does is it just extracts all of those additional flavors and sugars and color that you missed in the steep. This is just one way of doing the sparge. There are multiple ways of doing it. This is just how we're doing it right now. Be sure to poke it, get all of those flavors and colors out. It's important that you never, ever squeeze the bag. That will get you funny flavors. Squeezing the bag releases tannins, which you don't want in your beer. Gives you a very bitter, like a squeezed tea bag kind of taste, and we don't want that in our beer. And then we're going to add this sparge water to our steep water. Just poke it around for about 5 minutes. We don't have a lot of grains, so we don't have to do this very long. Our 5 minutes is up, so going to remove our grain. This is where people usually want to squeeze their grain bag to get everything they can out of it. Don't do that, because again, it will release tannins that you don't want in your beer. Now we're going to combine our sparge water with our steeping water. Simple as this. And at this point, we can turn on our heat to start our boil for the third step. At this point, temperature is not important. We're just going to get it up to a nice rolling boil. Right now, our steeping water is called wort. Wort is the German name for unfermented beer. We're reaching the beginning of our boil, so we're going to add our dry malt extract. We also have a 60-minute hop. And now I'll quickly explain the hop additions. We're going to have a 60-minute Northern Brewer hop addition. What that means is we're going to put our Northern Brewer hops in at the beginning of the boil. It's a 60-minute boil, so we call this a 60-minute hop. Now the German Spalt is going to go in at 30 minutes, so we call it a 30-minute hop. This means it goes in 30 minutes into the boil. A lot of people get confused because they read the instructions and they see a 60-minute hop addition, a 30-minute hop addition, 10-minute hop addition. What we're doing is we're counting backwards. So 60 minutes is first, 30 minutes second, 10 minutes third, and so on. And we're going to add our Pilsen dry malt extract. You'll see a lot of clumps formed, so just keep stirring. We're going to be stirring pretty much continuously throughout the 60-minute boil to prevent clumps. Now adding the Pilsen malt to reduce the temperature a little bit, so now we have to wait for the boil to return and we'll start our 60-minute hop addition. We're going to add our 60-minute hop addition, and our 60-minute hop addition is Northern Brewer. Now when you add your hops, you might get a bit of a boil over. Just watch it very carefully. If you do see that it's about to boil over, just remove your wort from your heating device, or you could squirt it with a bottle of water, cold water, and it should take care of it. But just watch it pretty closely. So here goes our 60-minute hop addition. Depending on your next hop addition, set your timer for that. So my next addition is in 30 minutes, so I'm going to set my timer for 30 minutes. It's been 30 minutes, so now we're going to add our 30-minute hops, German Spalt. Your 60-minute hops, they're for bittering. Your middle hops, around 30 minutes, are for flavoring, and your late hops, or your finishing hops, are for aroma. If you don't have any aroma, we're just going to add our bittering and our flavoring hops. Again, watch it for boilovers. Now we're going to set our timer for 20 minutes, and at the last 10 minutes we're going to add our yeast nutrient. We're going to add our yeast nutrient now. We have two to choose from, Y yeast, which is a powder form, and LD Carlson's version, which is a crystallized form. I'm going to go with Y yeast just because, and I'm just going to put a half a teaspoon in and let it go for another 10 minutes. We have reached the end of our boil, so I've turned the burner off, and now we're going to cool it down rapidly. Now the reason why we do this is because we need to pitch our yeast at about 65 degrees. Any higher, it will provide banana flavors in your beer, which you don't want. So we're going to cool it down to 65, and we're going to do this by first submerging it in a water bath. We'll later use ice, but we don't want to use the ice right now because it'll just melt, it'll be pointless. Normally we would use a wort chiller for this step. It's just a copper tubing that you siphon water through and it cools it rapidly. The reason why you want to cool it rapidly is because we reached a range of temperature where bacteria thrive. We're going to cool our wort down from boiling point to 65 degrees in order to minimize exposure to wild yeasts and bacteria. From this point on, you're going to have to make sure that anything that touches your wort is sanitized. So we're going to be using Star San for anything that touches our wort, thermometer, spoon, pot, whatever touches your wort. You have to sanitize it. Make sure that you sanitize your hands before you touch anything around your beer. Your spoon, your thermometer, your hydrometer. Make sure you sanitize your hands. Our temperature is at 152 about. We're going to keep stirring, and soon we're going to replace this water with an ice bath. Now we're going to fill our water with ice. We've already drained our water. We filled it with new water, and now we're going to fill it with ice. You will probably have to do this a couple times. It's going to get hot pretty quick, so I'm going to fill it once with maybe a third of this ice. This is our 6.5 gallon carboy. This will be our primary fermenter, which means it'll be the first thing that we ferment in. I just wanted to show you, this is water with Star San in it. This is before it's been shaken up. So I just wanted you to see how it looks when you shake up Star San in some water. And I'll just show you right here. As you can see, with just a little shake, there's a lot of foam. Do not fear this foam. It turns into a yeast nutrient. You do want to get all the remaining liquid out, but as for the foam, you don't have to worry about it. You can leave it. The sanitizer that I drained earlier, we saved it in our bottling bucket, and we're going to use this to sanitize everything that touches our beer. So we have the auto siphon right here. This is going to transfer our beer into our primary fermenter. Make sure that all the sanitizer gets pumped through it. Wash the outside. Make sure that the sanitizer touches every single surface. Make sure that your hose does not stay in your sanitizer for more than 15 minutes. Our wort is now at 65 degrees, so we're going to go ahead and transfer it from our kettle to our primary fermenter. And the reason I'm using an auto siphon is just so I can leave the extra hop residue and grain particulates in the kettle. Just going to pump it a couple times, and that should start our siphon. Since this is an extract recipe, we'll have to make up the difference with some bottled water. You see our line is just right there. We need it about right there, so I'll make up the difference with this. One of the most frequent questions we get is whether to use bottled water or tap water. There's really no specific answer, but we find that using half and half is usually good for Amarillo water. You're going to need to check your specific water for minerals, pH, and so on. And then you're just going to have to try and experiment and see what tastes good to you. At this stage, we're going to aerate our wort. You could do this in your pot, but I forgot, so I'm doing it in my carboy. So just make sure that you break the surface. The first stage of a yeast life is aerobic, so you want to make sure that you get a lot of air in your wort so they can multiply. This is the only point where you do this. When you pitch your yeast, you will not aerate your beer. You have to make sure that you do not aerate your beer or will leave funny flavors. Now we're going to take our gravity sample. We're going to do this by pumping our auto siphon. This is just a test vial. You could use a wine thief, but we don't have one on hand, so we're just going to use our test vial. And even though this test vial never touches our wort, we sanitized it anyway, just in case. So we're going to get about that much of our wort, and we're going to float a hydrometer in this. The way you're going to read this is, you see your beer line right there. Whatever number your hydrometer is floating at on the beer line, that's what your original gravity is. Original gravity is your gravity before you pitch the yeast. My brew stiff recipe that I made for this, it said that our original gravity is supposed to be at 1.054. We're at 1.050. We're going to call that good enough. It just means that we may have added a little bit too much water, but it's close. 18 hours ago, we made a yeast starter. This consists of a little bit of dry malt extract, and we dumped our White Labs yeast in here. So all this does is make sure that we have all of the usable yeast that we can get, and it will be more active when we dump it in our mash. So now we're going to add our yeast. Again, this is White Lab 004 Irish Ale, and our wort is under 65 degrees. So remember, do not pitch your yeast over 65 degrees. 70 at the most. We're just going to pour this in. We're not going to stir or anything. We're just going to pour it. Now we're going to add our airlock and our stopper. We filled up our airlock with a little bit of Star San. The best way to do this, so you don't break your airlock, is to stick it on before you put it in your carboy. So just stick it on like that, and then stick it on like this. We're pretty much done. We're going to take our carboy and put it in our brew room. We'll want to keep this at about 65. 70 is okay as long as you don't have high or low temperature swings. That is more detrimental to your beer than high temperatures or low temperatures. If you ferment too high, say 75 degrees or more, you're going to get banana flavors, which for this style is inappropriate. We're going to ferment this about 7 days. Be sure to take your hydrometer reading to make sure it's done fermenting, and it'll tell you on your instructions what your final gravity is supposed to be. If you reach your final gravity after 7 days, go ahead and transfer to your secondary. The purpose of the secondary is to get rid of the trube at the bottom of your carboy, and the trube is just the sediment, the trash that you don't want. The secondary is going to clarify your beer further. We've moved our wort into our brew room. We're going to cover this up tonight. You'll notice that we have towels covering our other brews. This is to keep the light out so it doesn't have any skunky flavors. Once we let it sit for a while, will clear up. You'll notice it's pretty foggy, but it'll clarify, and we'll move it to secondary in 7 days, and we'll be sure to post a video of that. Thank you for watching our video. It was brought to you by Amarillo Brewing Supply. Be sure to shop local whenever you can, whether that be with Amarillo Brewing Supply or with your own hometown brew store.